Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 61 of Not the Worsted Knitting Podcast. My name is Michelle, and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind meeshyfrazz Knits. In today's episode, we are going to be chatting all about my most and least favorite yarns for the fall and winter season. I get this question a lot, people asking me what my go-to yarns are, and now that the weather is starting to change, at least here in Western Washington, it's really starting to feel like fall. Today was a really crisp morning, it was overcast and cloudy. I thought today would be a great day to bring out some of my favorite yarns and maybe a couple not so favorite yarns and chat all about that, as well as talking about the projects that I've used for the yarn. So you might be able to see a little bit of it off to the side. I actually have some of my favorite yarns in this bin, as well as the not so popular ones. And then I have two bins over here with the projects that I made with them. So I've got a bin over here with all of my accessory knits, just the accessory knits that are kind of out of my favorite yarns. And then my garment knits. So you can see this bin is a little overfull, but these are basically the projects that I've made with some of my favorite yarns. And then that also includes what I'm wearing and what is on my mannequin. So I will be chatting all about these two as the yarns come up. I also have my laptop here. I've put it in my lap for now. I wrote a comprehensive list of all of these yarns and the information about fiber, weight, price. Most of this information I got from woolencompany.com. If they didn't carry it, then I just Googled the yarn and tried to find a website that was fairly accessible for everybody, at least in the US. I know this isn't the case for everybody. Of course, I live in the US in Western Washington, so this is just my approach for how I would get some of these yarns. So I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with my all-time favorites. We're gonna go through some of my most used yarn, talk about the yarn and what I love about it. And then as I go through the list near the end, I will talk about my disappointments. And these are yarns that maybe I had high hopes for, but they just didn't really meet the mark for me. Why don't we start with number one on the list, and that is Blue Sky Fibers Woolstok Worsted. You can see here I've got this I actually have a ton of this yarn in stash, like so many colors. This is the only skein I have left that I haven't wound up, so I wanted to show it in all of its beauty. So this particular color is cast iron, and let's talk a little bit about the properties of this yarn. So it's 100% Highland wool, and it is worsted weight. And then what's really cool about this yarn is it comes in two different sizes depending on your usage needs. So you can get it in a 50-gram hank, which is 123 yards, and it sells for about $9 US. But you can also get the 150-gram skein, which is what this is, and that is 370 yards, and that goes for about $24.80. Also, the country of origin for this is Peru, but I do want to note that Blue Sky Fibers is an American wool company. But I believe they source most, if not all, of their yarn in Peru, especially now because Malabrigo purchased Blue Sky Fibers a year or two ago now. It feels like it was just last year, but I bet you it was a couple of years if I actually looked back. So why don't I talk now a little bit about why I love this yarn so much. It was really fun to do this retrospective because I got to see just how much I've used some of these yarns, and it surprised me. I knew I enjoyed using Woolstok worsted, but I didn't quite realize I'd used it on so many projects. So I think what I love about this is it's a really good price for what you're getting. This is very much a workhorse wool yarn. But what I also love is that it's 100% Highland wool. It's a woolly wool, and yet it is not scratchy at all. It doesn't feel rustic. It feels nice and woolly and squishy, but it has no itch factor at all. And that is saying something for me because I actually think I'm more sensitive than most. I cannot wear mohair. There are certain yarns that a lot of people love, like Knit Picks Wool of the Andes. I cannot wear that yarn. I find Knit Picks Wool of the Andes to be so scratchy. I can't even wear an accessory. Like I tried to knit a shawl out of that and it was just a no-go. Whereas Woolstok worsted, it's great. I find it to be really soft and plump and squishy. It gives me that really hardy wool feeling, but I don't have any itch factor. And I have used this for hats. I've used it for mittens. I have used it for sweaters, many sweaters. I also have a scarf that used this. So this is just an all-around favorite of mine. So looking at my list for the Woolstok worsted, I have actually made 10 different projects using this yarn. And I know that that won't be the end of it. I actually am already thinking about another design that I want to incorporate this yarn as one of the contrast colors. So I cannot say enough about how great this yarn is. It's just such a good workhorse yarn. So enough about the yarn, why don't I show you some of the things I've made with it? If you've been watching me recently, then you are probably already expecting this. The first project, because it's the most recent project, is actually my Misty Pine sweater, which is in testing right now. And I have made 2 samples with it, and I am working on my 3rd sample now, which is actually going to be a reverse version where it's the same colors, just in reverse. So you can see that I will have 3 sweaters knit up in this, and it looks beautiful. The stitch definition is so good. Color work is really great on it. It also gives a nice little halo to make it soft and the stitches aren't super obvious, which I kind of love with bulkier yarns like a worsted weight, because I don't necessarily want to see big stitches, but I still want it to feel woolly and cozy. There's something about using a worsted weight yarn that doesn't feel like it has a huge gauge. And what I mean by that is just that when I look at the sweater, I'm not looking at it and going, man, those are huge stitches. I'm just looking at the sweater and saying, oh wow, that looks like a really cozy sweater. I just really love the stitch definition that it has because it feels so soft. And what I love about this is that the more you wear it, the more it softens up. You do get a little bit of fuzziness and a halo, but I haven't had a huge problem with pilling. And that leads me to the next projects that I did. These were projects that I did several years ago now. This is what kicked off the Misty Pines patterns to begin with. And this is the Misty Pines beanie. I did it in 2 versions. It's the same colors, but there's a high contrast and a low contrast version. Now, these are beanies that I wear on my head with no issue. I find them very soft. I typically, when I'm wearing this, I will throw it in my purse while I'm out and about and then put it on when I need to. And you can see I have never had to glean this, and I think it still looks great. There's a little bit of a fuzzy halo on it. Hopefully you can see that. But nothing crazy, no crazy pilling. And that's with me throwing it in bags, pulling it out, just being kind of rough with my knits. I'm pretty tough on my knits. I can't baby my knits just because if I do that, I'm just not going to wear them. I need them to work with my life, and that means that I'm just gonna be a little bit tougher. And if they can't withstand that, then they're probably not gonna last a very long time for me. But I have absolutely loved wearing this beanie. It's incredibly soft. It's very warm and woolly, especially with the color work. Then I also made some fingerless mitts with the same, so it's also the Misty Pine pattern in fingerless mitts. You can see that these have gotten some wear to them. I'm sure you can see a little bit more fuzziness on this, and I have gleaned these once. So full transparency, these have pilled a bit, but these are mitts that I am wearing all the time. So I'm wearing them when I'm driving, I'm wearing them when I'm taking walks, when I'm carrying things. These are getting thrown in and out of my bags as well. These have been used and abused, and I think that all things considered, they're holding up pretty well. I can't think of a single pair of mitts or mittens that I've knit that weren't a little bit pilled, just because they're getting so much friction and wear. It's to be expected, but all things considered, I think these look really great. And you know, you kind of get this crazy little fuzzy halo, which I just think makes them look even more cozy to wear. The next couple items I made with Woolstok worsted, these were actually from several years ago now. This is the Purl Soho Classic Ribbed Beanie, I think is the name of it. And also the Espace Tricot Upstate Scarf. It's funny because I don't normally make long basic scarves, but this was having a moment a couple of years ago when Taylor Swift did her red re-release, and I saw Espace Tricot put out this pattern, and I really just loved it. I thought it looked like fun, and I loved the idea of a bold red scarf. And I absolutely love the color of this red. I think it's called Red Rocks. And again, hardy woolly wool. incredibly soft. I love to wear this, especially when I want like a statement red scarf. And having a beanie that kind of goes with it, I think is just wonderful. I love this beanie. I mean, you can see, I've had this for a few years. I wear it a lot, and there's like no wear at all on it. It still looks great. So I have nothing but great things to say about Woolstok worsted. Now, that being said, this did lead me to a very interesting comparison that I wanted to bring up. And that is that sometimes when you're working with a yarn line in different weights, I don't necessarily think that they all have the same feeling or properties. So I have spent all of this time talking about how much I love Woolstok worsted. I think it's fantastic. I think it's soft. I think it's a fantastic workhorse yarn. However, I have also worked with their Woolstok Light, which is I think it's like a fine fingering weight. And I don't feel the same about this yarn. That doesn't mean that I hate it. This actually is not going in my disappointments list. I just would not put this on the same level as Woolstok worsted. So let me hold this up for you to see. This is a single ply yarn, and I'm sure that does actually play a role as to why it feels a little bit different and has slightly different properties. It's still 100% Highland wool, and it is a super fine fingering weight, in case I didn't say. And you get these in 50-gram hanks, which are 218 yards for about $9.60. What I find different about it is that this yarn feels rougher and scratchier to me. So I worked with this yarn not too long ago because I've loved Woolstok worsted so much. I wanted to try out the fingering weight version so I could have the same approach but with a smaller gauge. And again, I like the yarn. I think it holds up really well, but I am a little bit more sensitive to this than I am to the worsted, which I found really interesting. So the projects that I made with this are the Under the Ivy beanie and the Under the Ivy cowl. Let me get that right side up. So I have actually worn these a lot, and I've worn the Under the Ivy cowl a ton last season. However, I find that it needs to be very cold for me to wear these comfortably because they just have a little bit more of a scratchy feel. Like when I wear this, I know I'm wearing wool. Whereas when I'm wearing the Woolstok worsted, I don't really notice it as much. And I just find that to be very interesting. I don't know if it's the single ply nature or if it's just the fact that it's more of a fine fingering weight, but this is just maybe a little bit more noticeable for me. Now, I do love the stitch definition that you get. I love the color options that they have. And I also do think it is a very nice, hardy wool. Again, I have thrown this in my bag a whole bunch. I have not been kind to this because when it's kind of my daily wear for a while, it just is in my bag and, you know, I pull it out as needed. And it's held up beautifully. Like I have no complaints there. I still love this cowl. I love the beanie. I will admit, I don't wear this beanie as much as some of my other beanies because there's something about it being on my forehead where this feels a little bit scratchier. Whereas my Misty Pines beanie in the worsted weight is no problem at all. So I just wanted to mention that just so you kind of get an idea that like not all yarns are created the same even when they're in the same line. And it could really be something as simple as the amount of plies, or maybe the staple length is slightly different for the fingering. I'm not entirely sure, but just something I wanted to note. Okay, number 2 on my list, and this one is an absolute dream. I love this yarn. This is Illimani Amelie, and I don't have much left. This is actually all I have remaining. I wanted to show the green even though it's in a ball because look at the way that that glows. So you can see this is a blown yarn. So let me give you the properties. So this is 56% mulberry silk, 40% baby alpaca, and 4% merino. And I think the silk is actually the core, and then all of the blown fibers, I believe, are going to be the baby alpaca and the merino. This is an Aran weight yarn, and it comes in 50-gram skeins, and that is about 164 yards, and it goes for about $22. I found it kind of ranging from $21.50 up to $23, just depending on where you're located. And as far as I can see, I believe the country of origin is Montreal, Canada. I think that's where it comes from, but I'm not entirely sure. But this yarn was an absolute dream and delight to work with. Honestly, in terms of luxury yarns, this is probably my absolute favorite. I cannot speak highly enough about how luxurious this yarn feels. So with that being said, I do want to mention that $22 a skein for 50 grams, it's a bit pricey, you know, because typically you're buying 100-gram skeins. So if you think about it that way, you're basically spending $44 for 100 grams, and that's pricey. That is a lot of money to spend on a yarn. However, it helps when you have a gift card, which is what happened when I bought this yarn and why I felt a little bit more okay buying it. And I have absolutely zero regrets, and I would buy this yarn and work with it again. The project that I made with this yarn is my Robinia sweater, and I just have to tell you, this sweater is a dream. It's an absolute dream. I will hold it up for you so you can see the stitch definition. It's gorgeous, it's stunning. It has a beautiful halo, but it's also really drapey and silky. You can see it's got a beautiful sheen to it. And the halo is very subtle, but it's just enough. I just love this. It's also incredibly lightweight, which I just think is great. And I feel like that happens a lot with blown yarns because you just have a core and then you've got some loose fiber thrown inside of it. So it doesn't have a lot of weight to it like some of these other yarns might with a lot of plies. So I just find that this is a very nice, luxurious yarn. Especially what's really nice is that, you know, this is an Aran weight yarn. And sometimes for me anyway, I feel like the bulkier I go, the less fancy it feels. You know, sometimes when I'm going for like these bulkier weight sweaters, in my mind, I'm not thinking luxury. I'm thinking practical or comfy or warm, but this kind of defies all of that. And I think you get something that looks luxurious while still having really big stitches, which means that it doesn't take a very long time to knit up. This sweater, this colorwork sweater, I knit up so quickly. And I was even actually way off gauge because technically this yarn weight is smaller than all of the yarns you're supposed to hold together for Robinia, but I didn't care because I loved this yarn so much and I would 100% knit with this yarn again. Okay, number 3 on my list, and this is a really fun one, is So Happy Jane in her Sustain line. Now, I've got a couple of yarns here, you'll see, because these are different, but the same in a lot of ways. And they're also treated the same way and they're ethically sourced, which I wanted to call out. And I thought it would be best to show both of these just because the differences are very slight and it's more of a personal preference, but you're getting about the same thing, depending on which you would choose. So again, this is the Sustain line. I will hold up a full skein, a beautiful skein for you to see. This is in her Meadow DK. And this little nugget right here is her confetti worsted. Now, this is more of a heavy DK, light worsted, so they're pretty close. So the confetti, this is 89% fine non-superwash merino, and then the little flecks, the neps, the colorful neps, are 6% acrylic and 5% recycled nylon. This is listed as a worsted weight. It comes in 100-gram skeins that are about 220 yards and goes for $34. Now, the Meadow DK, which again, this is a light worsted to a heavy DK, and that is 100 grams and 240 yards. So you can see where this is 100 grams for 220 yards. This is 100 grams for 240 yards. So it's very, very close in terms of weight. And this goes for $32 and is 100% fine merino. It's a Shaniko wool. Both of these are. And they are, I believe they're both 21 microns, so they're incredibly soft, but they still hold up really well and are quite durable. So they don't pill like your average merino would. And these are hand dyed in Idaho by Heather Jane of So Happy Jane. What I thought was really cool, I pulled this from her website and I thought it was really important to share. This is hand dyed in Idaho. The sheep are also raised in the US. So they're raised on US ranches and farms certified by the Responsible Wool Standard through the Shaniko Wool Company. So everything here is very sustainable and ethical, and you feel a little bit better about where your money is going because you know that these animals are being treated with care, you know that the farm is being treated with care, and the yarn is being treated properly and appropriately. So it's just a really feel-good yarn to work with because of those aspects, but then also working with it is an absolute dream. And you might see what I'm wearing is what was made out of the confetti worsted, and I absolutely love it. So this is my Fidalgo cardigan. I actually designed this cardigan specifically with this yarn in mind. We worked together on this project, so Happy Jane sent me the yarn and I came up with this pattern working with it. And I have to tell you, I love this wool. I love this cardigan. I wear this cardigan all the time and I just finished it a couple of months ago. So this is just an absolute delight because it feels woolly, but it's really soft and it's holding up nicely. There's always a little bit of nervousness when you're thinking about doing a cardigan with merino. Really, I'm always a little nervous when I'm using 100% merino, especially non-superwash in general, because merino is very soft, which means it's also very susceptible to pilling. This is something that it just happens. The softer the yarn is, typically the more susceptible it will be to pilling. That's just kind of how it goes. But this is holding up really well. Of course, there is a little bit of fuzziness happening, but nothing outrageous, nothing crazy. I have some projects that I'm going to show near the end where that was not the case. So I'm not being overly kind to any of these. I'm being very honest, but I have to say that for a cardigan where especially things like the elbows and the underarms tend to wear very quickly for me. Also the shoulders, if I'm wearing a bag, those I'll tend to get the pilling just from where my shoulder strap is. I'm not having that here, and I'm really happy to see that. I think over time, of course, it will start to pill a little bit because it is merino, and just with some of these yarns, you need to go in knowing that there is a little bit of care that needs to go into your garments. This is why I own a gleaner, because every few years I like to go through and just glean and touch up any places that have seen a lot of wear. It's just to be expected with wool. It's just kind of what you're going to deal with. What we're looking for is anything that's pilling unnaturally fast or just feels like a waste of your time knitting it when it's pilling quicker than you can actually wear it. And this is not the case at all. This feels scrumptious. Let me just stand up so you can see some of the definition and this beautiful detail of this yarn. It's so soft, it's so dreamy, it's squishy while still feeling woolly. It feels like it's going to hold up for a really long time, and it feels like a workhorse yarn too. You know, there's something nice about, you have your luxury yarns that feel really soft, but they feel precious. This still feels like an all-around wool yarn that I feel comfortable throwing on and going out for a day and not being too careful about what I wear with it or what I'm doing with it. And I just love that combination where it can still feel luxurious but also hardy. So I enjoyed working with this yarn so much that I am going to be designing a Fidalgo pullover with her Meadow Decay base. Because I really wanted to have both options where you've got the one with the Tweedy yarn and then one with the solid yarn. I also want to mention here, because this is really fun news, as this pattern was being released, there were some changes at the mill and they weren't able to source the same Tweedy yarn, the confetti worsted, as before. They had to change it a little bit, and the base yarn that they sent Heather was significantly different from what they used to be sending her, and she couldn't work with that. It just wasn't holding up the same. So there was a very limited quantity remaining of the confetti worsted. However, Heather heard from the mill and was able to get her hands on a bunch more skeins. So if you were hoping to get your hands on some confetti worsted, definitely go check out her website now. I will put her links below. Just so you know, it is an affiliate link. Heather was kind enough to give me an affiliate link where I get a little bit of a kickback for her yarn sales. It doesn't cost you anything at all. It's actually a very kind gesture from Heather to actually give me a little bit of a kickback from her profit. And I just find that to be incredibly kind and thoughtful. She's somebody I thoroughly enjoy working with, and I think she's somebody who you should support because she's working really hard to work with ethical processes, ethical mills, and she's just an all-around kind and awesome human. So keep an eye out as I start to work on my Fidalgo pullover. I've got a couple projects I need to finish first, but this will be coming soon, and I'm so excited to work with this again. All right, number 4 on my list is Lana Grossa Cashmere Fine. Now, on the labels, I know it says Cashmere 16 Fine, but when I Google this, it always comes up as just Cashmere Fine. So I'm not entirely sure why the number is there sometimes and isn't others, but just thought I would note exactly what it looks like on the label. This is really fun yarn. It's yarn I haven't used in a couple of years, so I'm really happy to be able to talk about it again, because I always think to myself that I would like to use this in something else. This is 80% fine merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% polyamide. What I love is that it's quite an elasticy yarn. So you can see how elasticy that is. And it's because it's a chainette. Hopefully you can see that okay. It's very fine. Speaking of how fine it is. Now, the website lists this as a DK. I think this is more of a sport weight or a light DK, just based on the gauge that I got. Like, I know it does bloom and it does have a bit of a halo, but that is a pretty thin strand of yarn. So I would firmly put that in a sport weight, personally. And this comes in 50-gram balls, and you get 350 yards, and it's about $19. I believe the country of origin for this is Germany, and it's really a stunning yarn. You get a lot of yardage in these balls. Like, it doesn't look like a ton, but 350 yards in that's pretty good. So the project I made with this yarn is my Wildflower Bloom cowl. And I just love this cowl. All these years later, this is still an absolute favorite of mine. Obviously, a big part of that is the design. I just love the organic flowers in this, but a huge part of what I love about this is the yarn. This is the softest accessory I have. I love to wear this. It feels so warm and soft and cozy, and I love the texture. I love the stitch definition. Just look at that. It softens so much that you can barely see the stitches. And I really loved that with this pattern, because the big thing that I was going for with this Wildflower Bloom pattern was that I didn't want you to feel like you had blocky flowers. You're working off of a grid, so you're always going to have a little bit of that blockiness, but I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And I think this yarn really works wonders with that. It really fills the gaps where it needs to. It's incredibly soft. It's also incredibly elastic, so it pulls quite easily. And what I found with that, though, was that it gave me a very tight gauge. I am probably a bit of a tight knitter. I don't think I'm the tightest knitter, but I'm more of a tight knitter than a loose knitter. And this was just like off the charts in terms of how tight the gauge was. And it's just because I think the elastic nature of this yarn, it just pulls in so much once you finish working the stitches. But I really love that about this yarn, because I mean, just look at that texture, look at that fabric. I think it makes it. I think it's just so beautiful. So this is an absolute standout piece for me. I think the colors are stunning. You have a little bit of cashmere in there, so you get that softness, but it's got merino and polyamide, so you're still getting softness with a little bit of durability. You have an incredible halo, but it holds up pretty well. And I've had this for a few years now. It still feels great. Honestly, it's just getting softer with time. So I cannot speak highly enough about this. And I do look forward to using the rest of that yarn for something hopefully soon, maybe related, I'm not sure. I always wanted to make maybe like a matching headband or something, because I thought out of the cashmere that would just be an absolute dream. So maybe that's something that I will try to work on in the upcoming months. I don't know, we'll see. All right, number 5 on my list is Malabrigo Caprino. All I've got left in my stash is just this little bit of the white color. This is an 80% super fine merino wool and 20% cashmere. So this actually has a little bit more cashmere than the Lana Grossa fine cashmere. Now, I don't know if I would consider this to be softer, which is kind of interesting. I think the Lana Grossa feels a little bit softer, but this is still a very luxurious yarn, and I was very happy with the results of this. So these come in 50-gram hanks, and it's 159 yards for about $18.40. The country of origin is Peru, and I think that's just because, again, Malabrigo and Blue Sky Fibers are all the same company now, and I think all of that yarn is going through Peru now. In terms of the projects that I made with Malabrigo Caprino, the very first one I did, this was actually a test knit I did years ago. This was for Lauren Peterson. This was called the Feodora Capelet. And I picked this yarn out specifically for the pattern because I just thought it would be really gorgeous with this motif. And it was. It's beautiful. It is an incredibly beautiful fabric that it makes. It's so soft. This feels so good. My only regret is that I didn't use this to make a sweater because realistically, I don't wear capelets. I thought this was fun and I really enjoyed the color work on it, but I just never wear it, which seems like such a shame. Sometimes I'll wear it when I remember I have it and I'll put it on while I'm working, but it's just not the most practical garment for me, which does seem like a bit of a shame considering how fancy this fabric is. But you can see the stitch definition there. Also, it holds up pretty well. There's maybe a little bit of a halo if you can see it, but it's just really soft. You get beautiful stitch definition. It's not terribly fuzzy. It seems to hold up pretty well. So because of how well it held up and because I wanted to use it again, I did also use my remaining scraps for a second version of my Harbor View beanie, which you can see. It's really fun to see it with some texture. And so this is what that looks like. Obviously, I've got a huge pom-pom on here, but this is an absolute delight to wear because who doesn't want to wear cashmere on their head? It feels great. This is definitely one of my softest beanies. If I didn't already say, this is a light DK weight. So it's a pretty nice universal weight. I love a DK weight. If I had to pick one weight of yarn, it would always be DK because I feel like it's so versatile. So I really love this beanie. I love it in this color, which I believe is Pines. And I would also love to work with Malabrigo Caprino. Again, I don't see it super often, but when I do, I think about buying it. It's just, it is a little bit pricey, $18.40 for a 50-gram hank. So you do have to think about cost for that. But I do think it would give you a very beautiful garment, especially if you wanted to do color work. I think it would be absolutely gorgeous. And it has me thinking that I should make myself a color work sweater in Caprino sometime soon because that just feels so soft. Okay guys, buckle up because number 6 is Fyberspates Cumulus. And if you are familiar with me at all, then you know how much I love Fyberspates Cumulus. I saved this one for the end of my favorites just because this is more of a yarn that you're going to hold with something. This isn't necessarily a yarn you're going to use on your own, although I have used it on its own once, and we will talk about that. But this, as you can see, I have in many colors. These are all my leftovers. I absolutely love this yarn. This is a 74% baby Surrey alpaca and 26% silk lace weight yarn. It comes in 25-gram balls and it is 164 yards. This goes for about $10.40 per ball. The country of origin, I believe this is hand dyed in Chester, England, and I have loved using it for many years, for many projects, and I will continue to use it as often as I can. So why don't we just go through some of the projects that I have used with Fyberspates. First on the list is one of my latest releases, which is my long sleeve brunch crew, which you can see back here. If you would like to see all the behind the scenes on this sweater, definitely check out last week's episode because I talk all about that there. And then I'll just go down the order of all of the other projects that I've done. Before that one, we've got the Leon sweater. This is a petite knit pattern. I held this together with Newburgh Yarn Co. Hudson DK in the color Coleman Red. I absolutely loved the sheen this gave. This was with this red, and the Coleman Red was much more of a fire engine red, and the two of them together just made such a dynamic red. And this is actually what I really love about the Fyberspates Cumulus, is that I had the same sort of effect with this sweater, where I had a very stark blue main color and then this more periwinkle secondary color, and it really softened it up a lot. I just love how you can play with the colors, knowing that the Cumulus is going to change the color a little bit, especially if you're not sure about the color that you have, or if you kind of want to tweak it a little bit. This is a really fun way to play with colors and to do some heathering or marled effects. Before that is my prismatic reflection sweater, the solid version. This is using, I think, this one, which is Purl. And the main color of the sweater, it's lamb good fibers in the color Nolita. I don't remember what the base is called, but it was her fingering weight base. And so again, a fingering weight held with the Cumulus gives this really beautiful DK fabric. The main color has those speckles and a lot of hot pink in it, and the Purl just really toned it down a little bit. I also love using Cumulus as a way to kind of protect your indie dyed yarns in garments. And I know that that's a weird way to say that, but if you have worked with indie dyed yarn on a garment before, then you might know that there's always a really high chance that you're going to have a lot of color banding. You might have a lot of differences between skeins. You probably want to do some sort of helical knitting or alternating skeins if you can help it. But I find that I don't have to worry about that quite as much when I'm adding Cumulus to it. Now this goes for any Surrey or mohair, of course. This isn't exclusive to Fyberspates Cumulus. It's just that Cumulus is the one I love the most. And I have used other Surreys. I have tried to use mohair, and I just keep coming back to Cumulus because it's soft, it's fluffy, it doesn't affect your gauge a ton. Like, of course, it's probably a little bit thicker than a mohair, but not by much. And it just gives you such a beautiful fabric, such a beautiful halo, and it is so soft. It's so ridiculously soft. You don't want to take it off, even when it's hot out. I can't talk enough about how gorgeous it makes any fabric. All right, the last Fyberspates project I will show you. This one is fun because this is actually just using Cumulus on its own. So I am holding 2 strands of Cumulus together for this sweater, which is the Primavera sweater by Melanie Reinert. And this is a really gorgeous lace sweater. It kind of looks like it's cabled, but it's all just lace. And the 2 strands of Cumulus just make this absolutely dreamy. Being that it's lace, it's very open. Let me see if I can kind of show. So you can see my hand through there, but what I like about using the Cumulus is it's so fuzzy that it does really fill in those holes. Very similarly to this, because this also has lace, but the Cumulus fills in those holes too. So I think it's a really good way to do open gauge lace in the winter without feeling really exposed. I love the effect of that, but also this feels really soft and dreamy without being really hot. And that's, I mean, partially because of all the lace, but I love this sweater. It's very dramatic. Here's how it looks in the ball. So you can see it's held up pretty well. This is a sweater I knit several years ago. I will note that if you look close, some of the definition has kind of gone down just from washing and wearing because Cumulus, which is a Surrey, it's a bit matte, whereas mohair is a little bit shinier. Surrey can sometimes feel a little flat because it's definitely more of like a thicker fluff. And so it does kind of matte down a little bit, but I don't really think that takes away from it. If anything, it just makes it look that much fuzzier. Like, hopefully you can kind of see what I mean there, where some of that, you don't get a ton of stitch definition. But I don't think with a garment like this, it's really what you're going for anyway. I mean, it could be, but for me, I liked the idea that you were softening the lace enough to where it felt like a winter garment. All right, that was it for my Cumulus. I know I've made it in a ton of projects and I will continue to. I just love it. All right, guys, now on to our disappointments. There are only 2. I only included 2 disappointments. That's not to say that there are only 2 yarns that I've ever used that I didn't like, but these were yarns that I specifically had high hopes for and found them to be disappointing. There are some yarns I've used where I just don't like them because either they're too scratchy or I didn't love working it up, or maybe they had so many hay bits in it that I was sneezing the whole time. But those are very specific and personal things, whereas these things I just felt, I don't know, I felt like I wanted more out of them, and that's not what I got. Let's go ahead and talk about number 1 on the disappointments list, and that is Rowan Felted Tweed. So this is a 50% wool, 25% alpaca, 25% viscose, light DK weight yarn. And it comes in these 50-gram balls, which are 191 yards, and it costs $17 a ball. And the country of origin for this is Italy. Now, this one was one that I kind of grabbed on a whim. I hadn't spent too much time preparing for using this. I'd always wanted to use Rowan, and as of right now, this is still the only Rowan yarn I've used. And I think this is probably a bit of a misrepresentation of Rowan because I've heard a lot of really great things. This I did not enjoy. So when I bought this yarn in the store, it feels very soft. It feels quite nice. I did the test where I put it up against my neck. I thought it felt fine. There was nothing really that concerning to me. You can feel a little bit of that kind of woolly feel. It might even be the alpaca that gives it, you know, sometimes alpaca can have a little bit of a prickle factor. But there was nothing that felt egregious about this when I saw it in the store. And I thought it was really beautiful. You can see it's got these tweedy bits in it, which I thought would give some really nice definition to the finished fabric. Now, once I started to work it up, I definitely noticed that it was much scratchier than I was anticipating. So here is the finished item that I made with it, which is the Magnolia short sleeve by Camilla Vad. I think this is a beautiful top, and I love the way it looks. And I think that's part of why it's such a disappointment to me, because when you look at that, it looks beautiful. It appears really soft. It has a nice effect to it to where it kind of has a fuzzy effect. You get a little bit of those tweedy bits, but you can also still see the lace work quite nicely, even on a darker color. The stitch definition is pretty good, but it is so scratchy. It's very uncomfortable to wear. I have to be very thoughtful about wearing this. I actually decided to make this a short sleeve version while I was knitting this up because I knew if I made the long sleeve version, I would never ever wear it. And it's because I have to be freezing in order to wear this. Like, it needs to be cold for me to wear this. And even then I'm wearing a camisole underneath and I'm protecting as much of my skin as I can because this is just so uncomfortable to wear. I also don't know if this was just how it was stored or if this is how it came from the manufacturer, but when I went to wet block this, when I was finished knitting it, I had to soak this thing about 4 times before the water ran clear. And it wasn't dye, the water was like gray brown. So the yarn was dirty. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it was spinning oils, maybe it was some of the dye that just happened to look dirty, but the water seemed more dirty than filled with dye. So this might just be a very bad personal experience, but I do know some other people who I've talked to who worked with the felted tweed and also said they can't wear their garments. So this is just one of those where I would warn anyone against using this yarn. It looks soft, it looks delightful, but I don't find this to be worth the money when there are so many yarns that hold up just as nicely, that have the same characteristics, that you'll actually enjoy wearing. All right, number 2 on my disappointments list, and this is actually the final yarn that I will be talking about today, and this is kind of a disappointment for all of the opposite reasons of the last yarn I just talked about, and that is Woolfolk Fleck. Unfortunately, I don't have any more yarn to show, so I will go ahead and hold up my finished garment just so you can kind of see it while I chat about the properties. So this is 90% ultimate merino wool and 10% Donegal tweed. It's a sport or DK weight yarn. It comes in 50-gram hanks and it's 160 yards, and that is $22. And the country of origin is Patagonia. So the garment that I did is the Trompe sweater by Josie Paquin. And I love this sweater. I love the design. It's a beautiful top-down raglan with this really fun cable on the raglan. And this yarn is so soft. It is maybe one of the softest yarns I've ever worked with. And that is where the problems happen. So this is my second Woolfolk yarn that I've worked with, and I've had a similar problem with both, but I found this to be way more egregious, and that's why this one is a disappointment. This has pilled so badly that my sleeves are now felting. And yes, I've worn this sweater a decent amount, but I have not worn this sweater enough to warrant felted sleeves. So I don't know how well it's going to show up. I can see it very clearly on my end, but these sleeves are significantly shorter than they used to be. And that is because this has all matted. Let me see if I can... It's so hard to tell sometimes because I know I'm just filming with my iPhone, and I know the iPhone has a tendency to over sharpen things. And so where I can see looking at this that it is just completely matted, it kind of looks much clearer on the screen. So I'll have to see in post how this actually looks, but that's actually a pretty good representation right there. You can see how that started to get matted. So it's gone beyond pilling, and this is just straight up felting. And it's really bad on the sleeves. I have gleaned this several times, and this is really just the best we can do. It just pills like crazy. And this sweater, what has happened is that this sweater is now shorter on me than it used to be. The sleeves are shorter on me than it used to be, and I can no longer wear this sweater because it's just basically too small. And it's worn so poorly that I don't feel good about giving this to somebody at a smaller size than me, because it kind of looks messy. Like in person, it looks messy. It's a huge disappointment because this is a very expensive yarn. If you've ever been to a store that carries Woolfolk yarn, or if you've seen them at a fiber festival, I'm sure you've gone over and touched it, and it is the softest, most luxurious feeling yarn you will experience. And it's very tempting because it feels like a dream, but it just doesn't hold up. And that's why it's really good to check micron counts. That's also why it's good to just sometimes see reviews on Ravelry so you can find out how people think something is wearing over time. Basically, I knit this summer before last, and it didn't obviously get wear right away because I was knitting it in the summer. And then I wore it a few times over the winter, and I just noticed the pilling immediately. And it got to the point where I was just gleaning it every time I went to put it on. And at some point, it just didn't matter anymore because the sleeves just got so matted, and they're short on me. So the sleeves really come to like probably about there on me, and it's crazy. Like it doesn't even look good. And I just can't recommend that anybody use this. Again, I've worked with a couple of Woolfolk yarns at this point, and this is the one I really wanted to call out as being a disappointment. The other one I worked with is Luft, which wasn't so bad. It's very soft. It does pill like crazy, but it's a blown yarn, so it feels a little bit more manageable. This one though, it's just not something I can recommend. And it's a shame because it's gorgeous. I mean, look at the tweed on that. It's a really beautiful, beautiful yarn that you can't wear. So maybe if you wanted to use this yarn on an accessory that you're hardly ever gonna wear, that you're very careful with, I don't know, like a beanie that you wear like twice a year, maybe, because it will be soft, but it's just not going to last. And for the amount that you're spending on this, there are some really gorgeous yarns that you could get, even with cashmere, that are gonna hold up better than this. And so I just cannot recommend this yarn. All right, well that concludes my most and least favorite yarns for the fall and winter season. I hope that this was helpful in some way. Maybe you've looked at some of these yarns, but you weren't sure if you wanted to use them yourself or not. Maybe you're just looking for inspiration or trying to figure out how you could use some of these yarns with particular projects, or you have a project in mind and you're trying to figure out what yarn to use. I just thought this was helpful. I know I get the question every now and then about what my favorite yarns are, and I just really thought this would be a great way to bring everything out. I really enjoyed this retrospective too. I actually might recommend, if you feel motivated, to maybe do this for yourself, because it was really great to take the time. I went through my projects. I pulled out the ones that I was like, man, I really love this. I thought about the yarn that I've used a lot, the yarn that I look at and think, man, I want to use that again. And putting it together in a list, it just made me really think about the yarn I find worth using and the yarn I don't find worth using, and making sure that I am only knitting with the things that bring me joy and make me happy. I think it's very important with a hobby like this that, you know, if we're spending the kind of money we're spending and we're spending the amount of time we're spending on these projects, we should really love this. So I don't want to spend a ton of money on a sweater's quantity of yarn and never want to wear the sweater. Of course, that cannot be avoided. It's going to happen every now and then, but the more I work with specific yarns, specific fibers, the more I kind of know what my go-tos are. And I know that this is very different for everybody, and so I think it's good to maybe do a retrospective. Maybe this is something that's actually good to do at the end of the year, is just kind of do a retrospective of your highs and lows and think about what made them a highlight or maybe a not so favorite. So if you stuck around until now, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to get in touch with me, I am meeshyfrazz on Instagram and Ravelry. You can email me at meeshyfrazz@gmail.com, and you can find me on my website, which is meeshyfrazzknits.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.